This is Mary Jo Tinley from the Teaching Your Toddler podcast. As parents, we are always going to have challenges with our kids. There's going to be things we have to navigate and we have to know what to do. Today's topic is about navigating dyslexia for your child. First, figuring it out, if your child might have some signs, and also what to do in the school system if your child does have a challenge like this. Our very special guest today is Robin Zikmund. She's a mom who found out some things about her child that she didn't know what to do. She educated herself, but she also realized that the educators she was working with didn't know what they were doing, and she had to actually end up educating them. So on today's amazing episode, you're going to hear more from Robin and her story, but she's one of the best kinds of moms because she took it into her own hands to figure out what to do to help her son with his dyslexia. She is also the strategic relations manager for IMSE, which is the Institute for Multisensory Education. It's a literacy training company founded on this or focused on the science of reading. She's also the founder and president of Decoding Dyslexia Idaho, which is a grassroots movement that aims to increase access to educational interventions and teacher professional development for dyslexia and other language-based learning disabilities in the public schools. I can't wait for you to hear about Robin's story and her son's story, and also how she helped her son and helped learn and also teach other educators about this extremely common and hereditary condition that happens to many, many children in this country. So I can't wait to hear from it. Welcome to Robin. All right.
course.
Hello, this is Mary Jo Tinley. Today we have a great guest to talk to us about something that's very important and something that all parents need to be aware of. Our guest today is Robin Zikmund, and she is going to talk to us about dyslexia and reading specifically. So, Robin, welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Robin Zikmund, I'm here in Idaho. My journey started in the state of Colorado, and I'm just a mom with a very atypical kiddo that was misunderstood and misdiagnosed, and the failures of that were excruciating. So I'm super passionate about trying to bring awareness about the things that I wish I would have known as a mom early in the game.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you'll be able to share those tips on the front end for a lot of parents, because as we navigate and we see these sort of signs happening, we don't always know what we're looking at. So your story is going to talk about dyslexia, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about that condition first?
Yeah, sure. So dyslexia is just a difference in the brain. It's just simply they do categorize it as a learning disability. I don't prefer that word, but it's simply a difference in how a kiddo's brain is wired. It is hereditary and it's incredibly common. 1 in 5 kiddos struggle with dyslexia, and dyslexia is a large spectrum. It presents itself in several different ways. So no two kiddos are going to look alike. I think that's why it's sometimes super hard to identify. I often say saying you're dyslexic is like saying you're autistic. Are you nonverbal or highly functioning? That is truly the spectrum that it presents itself in. So it's just a learning difference, and it should be taught fairly easily, and early intervention is key. So we know now through science, I mean, the reading brain has had more science research done than probably any. I think there's 50 years, 5 decades of research around the reading brain and how the brain learns to read. We know that a kiddo is born and the brain is prepared to learn to speak. And they do that through, following mom and dad as a toddler. We're exposed to language. And so it just comes automatically for a child to speak. It does not come automatically for any child to learn to read. It has to be explicitly taught. And a child that has a learning difference like dyslexia, even more so.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So I'm, of course, if your child is just learning to read, that's when you would start to see the signs. Before that, you're not going to know because of what you just said. You wouldn't be learning that. So what are those sort of clues for parents if they are starting to see that in their early reader?
Yeah, actually, you can identify some characteristics of dyslexia pre-learning to read. So as early as 4 years old, when you're home with your toddler and they're struggling to, I think the number one might be rhyming. They're struggling to rhyme. You know, I was a stay-at-home mom and I thought I was doing all the right things. I read to my boys since they were infants because I love to read. So that was just something we did all the time. So they were exposed to a lot of literature, but I never stopped to recognize whether my son was catching on to rhyming. So although I read all the, old school books from years ago, that, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall and what rhymes with cat, bat, hat. And I never picked up on the fact that that was a struggle for him to find a word that rhymed. So those are some early indicators: rhyming, kiddos struggling with holding on to colors, recognizing shapes. Um, so those are some early indicators, and I wish I had a list in front of me to share some more, but I certainly would be happy to follow up with you on that. But there are definitely signs that parents could catch preschool age, that are characteristics of dyslexia. It doesn't mean your kid has dyslexia, but those are some early language indicators on whether the brain is going to catch on to some of these reading skills or not.
And it sounds like, we haven't talked about your specific situation yet, but that you had. I'm reading the notes here, and that you were so stressed out. You knew that your son was going to be challenged at school, and you had major anxiety about that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened with your son?
Mhm. So I think that another early indicator is delay in speech. A lot of dyslexic kiddos also might have a speech impediment, so they might be flagged for speech from their pediatrician early on. Again, does not mean they're dyslexic, but that is also an early indicator. My son didn't have any speech issues, but he had few words. So he wasn't meeting the milestone that those I now know the milestones those in those early years are something I wish I would have paid more attention to, because he didn't have the number of words that they say that a toddler should have. I wasn't too worried. He was quiet. He was very smart. I always took him to story time at the library, and weekly we would leave that story time and all my friends' kiddos would drag them off to the fiction section and be checking out all the fun books from whatever the latest is on PBS or Disney. And my son would grab my hand and he would drag me over to the encyclopedias. Never forget it. And we would check out these giant encyclopedias on animals and history. And I'd check out, my girlfriends would be like, wow, that's what Carter picked out. I mean, he's a genius. And I would read them to him and he would retain the information. We'd be at family barbecues and he's sharing out all there is to know about the sperm whale and how deep it lives and what it eats. And I'm thinking there's no issues. Although he was kind of delayed in speech and there were a few things, he didn't seem too interested in hanging on to that's a square and that's a circle. And I just thought it's not important to him. He isn't focusing on that. He's certainly bright because look at what he does do. And then we get into kindergarten. And actually, I'm sorry, let me back up. My pediatrician noticed a couple milestones and suggested a child find evaluation. So we went to a child find evaluation at age 4.
Are you saying
Um,
find, Find?
yes, child find,
Okay.
FIND. It's actually a federal law, all
Oh,
state. Yeah, states are all required to follow the child find laws. And that basically says that any of us, whether you're an educator or in the medical field, it is your job to find these children early, these children that are not meeting milestones, that have flags that might be of concern. And it's a paid for through federal dollars, that you can go to Child Find to receive an evaluation. So I went kind of reluctantly because I'm thinking he's pretty spot on, but okay, if she's telling me there's some concerns, I'm going to go ahead and go. So 2.5 hour evaluation at age 4 by a team of experts, specialists, they certainly know, right? SLPs, OTs, child psychologists, spent 2.5 hours with my son. At the end of the evaluation, they said, yep, he's delayed. And he qualifies for what's called an IEP, an individualized education plan. I thought, oh my heavens, okay, in what ways? What does this mean? And they just said, we now can provide services to close some of these gaps through our public education system. It's a free service, and we're going to write this IEP and write some goals and kind of support Carter in preschool. So I followed through with that. We had a really rough year, that preschool year. The system at the time for me, and this is 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, it felt very not welcoming of a parent's perspective. I now have learned a lot about the IEP world and how it actually is supposed to look through federal law. This is through IDEA, the Individual Education Act. And the parent's voice is an equal member of the IEP team. And it's really important that IEP teams really understand and embrace the parent at the table. That wasn't my experience at the time. So I felt very navigated by these experts, if you will. They were quite sure that they knew my son better than I, although they'd only spent a very short amount of time with him. So never do I recall being asked about my opinion of where my son was and what the struggle, what I was seeing at home. I was just kind of put into the system of just like following, checking all the boxes that they were required to check. And it felt scary. It felt scary, and I felt alone and very unsure. So the preschool year was somewhat difficult. My son's a summer baby. Turned 5 and then was shortly expected to start kindergarten. And I just thought, he's not ready. I just don't think he's ready. So I chose to not move forward with that. And it was not well received by the IEP team because they very much felt that they knew more than I did. And thought, well, okay, Robin, if you're going to go ahead and choose to not start him in kindergarten, he's going to lose services. And good luck with that. And I thought, well, I guess I'll take my chances because I just don't feel like you know him as well as I do.
That's shocking. It's
Yeah,
definitely
it's a
not in the
hard,
child's best interest, is it? Wow.
no, quite a journey. So I am an advocate now with many parents that I try to support and help them understand what it could and should look like. And I try to help IEP teams understand what it could and should look like. And the parent's voice in all of that is very important, very important. So we went ahead and didn't do kindergarten at 5, and I did a 5K pre-K program, 5-day-a-week pre-K program, and we really targeted some of those early literacy skills. And he made some progress. Somewhere in that, I had done a lot of deep dive research. I have a plaque on my desk here that says a worried mom does better research than the FBI.
I have that in my bathroom. I have that plaque.
Right?
Yep.
Right. Isn't it true?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my
Absolutely.
heavens. I mean, as a stay-at-home mom, I had a lot of time to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what was going on with my son because I felt like these experts really didn't know. They really didn't know. So somewhere in that, I ran across a screener of dyslexia, and I could check every box. And I thought, oh my heavens, why didn't anyone during that 2.5-hour evaluation, any of these experts, do a simple screener for this number one learning disability? I still am shocked by that.
Right. So was that a person that you found that was a specific individual, or was that a
It
test?
was an online screener.
Oh, wow. An online screener. Okay.
I had just done research, like, learning disabilities. He seemed to not be meeting certain milestones. So just through my deep dive of research, I ran across dyslexia and thought, gosh, maybe that's it. And I did have actually a kindergarten teacher friend at the time who had planted the seed and said, I wonder if he's struggling with dyslexia. And I thought, okay, I'll start researching that. Really didn't know anything about dyslexia. I mean, I think my knowledge of it was, I think they flipped their letters.
Yes, that's what I would have said, B and D or whatever, right?
Not that. It's not that. Although our kiddos do that reversal
Mm-hmm.
at times, it is not about flipping letters. Dyslexia is about the brain, the pathway to learning to read. The dyslexic brain takes in the information in a different way. And so it has a longer path to get to absorbing the print on paper. And it is very easily remediated. But we know that the reading brain, or that the brain in general, and I'm going to say the word wrong, what is it? Neuroplasticity is the brain is that. And so up until a certain age, there's so much that can be done to the brain in developing certain areas of it. But after a certain age, it's much more difficult.
Oh,
So I'm
really?
incredibly passionate about catching our kids early. And I can't recall the age. What is it, 7 maybe? I'd have to look it up. But in our public education system, we really don't do a good job of screening children for this number one learning disability in order to catch them early when the brain is in a place to be reprogrammed or developed, rather. We don't do that. We have this wait to fail method. Let's wait and see. He's fine, Robin. He's a boy. Give it time. He's just not interested in reading. And I thought, really? And I really just followed what I was told by my education team, because certainly they knew more than I did. I don't have their degree. I'm not a teacher. And I trusted that. I trusted in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it failed my son. So by the time he was in third grade, and I was pretty sure, well, let me rewind. By the time he was in kindergarten, I had planted the seed. I think my son might have dyslexia. It's okay, Mom. We got this. No worries. So I, again, trusted the system. By the time he was in first grade, he'd made no progress in reading. I then requested another special education evaluation. I think he needs help. We've missed something. We went through the whole process again of this testing by a team of experts. He again qualified. We wrote again an IEP that started to get administered at the tail end of first grade. It's about too late at that point. Not too late, but we've missed some prime opportunity, right? So come the beginning of second grade, we're going to go ahead and start to target some intervention. And I was in the state of Colorado at that time. They were a whole language school. If we follow it all, what's gone on with the national literacy crisis, those that are listening are familiar with the failures of literacy nationwide. And it's not specific to our dyslexic kiddos. It's the approach that we moved our education system over into teaching reading using whole language. And my school was a whole language school, and my son was placed in the 12-week reading recovery program that we now know is not effective. We did that program. I recall going to one of the sessions. I said, can I just sit in? I want to know what I should be doing at home. I sat in this session, this lovely woman, I adored her. She, in fact, chose not to retire so that she could work with my son just one more year. They had a great relationship. And I sat in this session, and she gets out this picture book, and it's, one of those basic books, 5, 6 pages. There's a picture on each page and about 3 words. And she goes, we start with a picture walk, Mom. And I thought, okay, right there, check. I haven't been doing that at home, so I got that wrong already. So she does this picture walk, and oh, look, Carter, there's a boy. And oh, look, he's at the park. Oh, he has a ball. Oh, there's a dog. Last page of the book was a picture of a canoe. And she says, and look, he's got a canoe. Okay, now we're going to close the book, Mom. Now we're going to read. And I thought, okay, wow. Taking notes of what I need to start doing at home. And we opened up the book, and my son read every word. And I'm looking at his eyes. I know him well. He is not even looking at the words, but he's smart. He's smart. He literally got every word right. We get to the last page. The word is canoe. The picture is canoe. He says boat. She closes the book and says, good job, Carter, and sends him back to class. And I'm thinking, oh, what is going on? And she says, oh, we don't want to discourage him. We want him to fall in love with reading. And honestly, that is the beginning of my deep research into how are our public schools teaching reading. I'm an older mom, so back in my day, we were taught very much in a phonics-based approach, and this felt very different. So I did a big deep dive of research, and that's where I began to learn that it is not just our dyslexic children who are not being taught to read in our public school systems. So those of you that are listening, if you haven't tuned into the podcast Sold a Story, highly recommend Sold a Story. Emily Hanford, oh my heavens, I just lost Emily Hanford is a researcher. She's a reporter who did the podcast, and it is jaw-dropping to hear how our education system and how political the system is, and how many people are actually making money on the failures of reading in our nation. So anyhow, fast forward, we picked up our family and moved here to the state of Idaho because I'm from Oregon, and this is as close as we could get. And I, by then, was sure that my son was dyslexic. I came here to the school. We have an IEP. I said, my son's dyslexic. Here's his IEP. What Orton Gillingham-based programs do you offer? And what training have you had in structured literacy? Eyes just glazed over. My poor special education teacher just looked at me like she had no idea what I was talking about. And she says, well, we don't call it dyslexia in Idaho. And I thought, really? Because it's a learning disability that's covered under federal law. It's called dyslexia, so I'm pretty sure we call it that. And I just realized how behind we were here, and I thought something's got to be done.
So it wasn't it wasn't like they were trying to evade federal categorization or something. They just didn't do it.
They just didn't know. They didn't know. So a couple of things I've learned now, several things, but is we need to be doing a better job starting at university level. Our university teacher prep programs have not been historically preparing our teachers in how to understand learning disabilities. And in my opinion, all teachers need a course, not a deep dive if you're not going to be in special ed, but definitely a course to understand what a student with dyslexia looks like. The most common knee-jerk reaction from most teachers is, oh, your son struggles with ADHD. That's their go-to term. Everything's ADHD. There's a pill for that.
Yep.
And dyslexia is so often misunderstood as being ADHD. And don't get me wrong, many of our kiddos do have dyslexia and ADHD. However, it's kind of the chicken before the egg scenario. Is the student struggling to hold their attention because the paper you just put in front of them is so painful for them to try to decode, therefore they don't hold their attention? And to you, classroom teacher that's overwhelmed and has a crowded classroom, who's doing such hard work and trying their best to manage all these different little kiddos with different needs, you just recognize that my son in the back of the room appears to not be able to hold his attention. Fair, that's fair. But we got to look past that. Why? Why is he struggling? Is he really struggling to hold his attention, or is he just avoiding something that's difficult that's been put in front of him? And that's reading. And why is reading difficult? What's going on?
Right. Getting to that root cause.
We'd get to the root cause. Right. I mean, I even have relationships with school nurses out there. It's so obvious to us. You've got these kiddos that have either behavioral issues, or they have mental health issues, or they, what's going on. All of a sudden, Johnny's down in my room, my nurse's office, every day with a tummy ache. What time of day is that? Is it during the ELA block? Or, Johnny has caused a scene in the classroom because he's knocked his desk over, or has kicked his chair, or caused a scene and had some behavior that's not well received in a classroom environment. And when is he doing that? Every day. And why? Because he is not wanting it to stand out that he can't do what you're asking him to do, teacher. So this is what he's doing to try to avoid looking dumb among his peers. you know?
Better to act out than to have that, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, right. I mean, we know that. Remember, school's hard as a kiddo. Kids are mean to kids, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a hard environment. And when you've got your peers all around you, for my son, I mean, he did not have behavioral issues. He was very much a pleaser. And so he exhausted himself with anxiety trying to accomplish and please his teachers, to the point where at 9 years old, he comes home and says, "What's wrong with me, Mom? I just want to kill myself.
Oh,
I just want to kill myself at
at
9."
9. Oh.
And I thought, this was a well-adjusted, happy boy that was smart. And I put him in a system that didn't understand him. And our
Mm-hmm.
poor teachers didn't know how to teach him. They
Mm-mm.
didn't leave our university teacher prep programs with the skills in structured literacy, with the awareness of what to look for in this number one learning disability. They are doing the best that they can with what they've been given. So we got to fix universities, right? And then secondly, we've got to act quick in pre-K and kindergarten in a simple screener. Nobody needs to diagnose. We don't need this big label that you're dyslexic. We just need a simple screener. And then we need to act fast with a teacher who has been trained in structured literacy, who knows how to teach effectively using Orton-Gillingham methods. What's good for dyslexic kids and learning to read is good for all kids. Good for all kids. And our national literacy crisis, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if a couple of simple things could be done.
Wow.
But it's
Well,
not happening. And so now I've got a ninth grade son still reading at third grade level, and he's being pushed through a system. He'll be handed a diploma, illiterate, and I'm really passionate about it, because more so because I'm fortunate in that I had the resources. There's a saying in the world of dyslexia that it's, just being dyslexic is a gift. If you're dyslexics have gifts, and they do, I would agree that some do. But really, it's only a gift for those that come from a family of means,
mm,
because we have the ability to hire an outside dyslexic specialist. I have spent more money than I care to admit on trying to get my kiddo what he needed. And my heart breaks for the families that don't have that option. What happens to those kids? I can tell you what happens. Number one, dyslexia is hereditary. So a lot of times mom and dad struggle themselves. So they themselves don't even know what's going on. And they just think, well, school was hard for me. It's hard for you too. And you can do like we did. And we work at the local, mini mart. And that's all well and wonderful and good. But these kids have a lot of potential if they were given the opportunity to learn to read. There's
mhm.
another little meme out there I've seen that says their reading classroom is the pipeline to prison. True.
Ooh,
If you don't know how to read, what happens? You
right.
can't read, you can't be successful in math. Many of our math today is a lot of reading involved. You can't read, you're not going to be successful in any class in any school setting.
No.
Right? And so what happens to these kiddos that don't get what they need, or don't even have a parent that has the knowledge that maybe they have dyslexia? They are convinced that they're dumb. They're convinced that they can't be taught. These kids drop out of school. These are the children in our juvie system. These are the children that are angry and have mental health issues. And I don't blame them.
No.
How sad that our system has led them to believe that they are dumb,
Mm,
because
yeah.
they aren't being taught the way their brain needs to be taught. So unfair. And honestly, in my opinion, all of society should be as passionate as I am. We need to do better. We need to catch these kids early. We need to spend our dollars up front in doing that, because ultimately we're spending it anyway, through our
Hmm.
juvie system, through our prison system, through our mental health system.
Hmm. One way or another, right?
We've got it wrong.
Yeah. Before I let you go, tell us how to find your organization, and also how to find you.
So I am with the Institute for Multisensory Education, IMSE. It is based out of Michigan, created by a passionate teacher. 26 some years ago, who realized she herself was in a classroom and didn't learn what she needed to learn in her university teacher prep program. She did not know how to teach children to read, and that wasn't okay with her. So she said, I got to do something. And she left and founded this amazing company that now is committed to teaching teachers based in the science of reading, using structured literacy and pulling in Orton Gillingham methods so that all children can learn to read. So we support, we have a couple of courses, teacher professional development courses that are very impactful in what I wish my son's kindergarten and first grade teacher would have known. His trajectory would have been much different. He's on the severe end of the spectrum, so ultimately my son probably still may have needed further support, but he didn't get the foundational skills that were crucial in kindergarten and first grade because he didn't have a teacher that had the knowledge or the skills or the resources to teach effectively. So IMSE.com is the company that I now work for as a dyslexia advocate. And I also am the founder of the Decoding Dyslexia Idaho chapter. Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots movement out of New Jersey. I didn't start it. They started it in 2011, passionate group of parents that thought we have to do something. Our kids need support. And every state had a chapter. When I was looking for support in Idaho, I ran across it. I thought, oh my heavens, there's the ladies I got to meet. They're going to help me find what I need to know. And I learned that Idaho didn't have a chapter. So I was asked to start it. And I started it in 2018. The mission is to bring awareness to dyslexia in our public schools, advocate for what our kids need, and pass state legislation requiring a dyslexia screener.
Oh, that's amazing. Goodness. Well, you have given us so many good ideas and tips, and I know that I'm sure listeners are questioning it, or at least they know what to start to look for their kids, no matter what the age is. I so appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll absolutely make sure that these links are included in the show notes so that the listeners can find more information about all of the things that you talked about. I so appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you very much, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.